All right, well, welcome everyone. I'll introduce myself first and we'll kick us off. My name is Mark Goldberg. I am a board member for NCATC and I'm in my fourth year on the board here. I'm based out in Portland, Oregon. I also have the pleasure of chairing our Government Relations Committee for NCATC that has helped set up this webinar today. And we are thrilled to focus on federal policies and the future of workforce development for this webinar. We're honored to have two incredible speakers who have tremendous expertise in Washington, D.C., concentrating on federal policies. We'll hear first from Omar Nashashibi from the Franklin Partnership Group, as well as Jeffrey Connor Naylor from Business Leaders United. And just wanted to thank NTMA, the National Tooling and Machining Association, for sponsoring this webinar, including Bill Padnos, who has been our point of contact there and partner. Before we dive in, just wanted to provide a little bit more background on NCATC as an organization. So we are the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers. We are an affiliate of the American Association of Community Colleges, AACC, and primarily are practitioners that support and lead advanced technology programs and facilities at community and technical colleges, along with a number of strategic industry partners. And if you could advance the slide there. So as an organization, we have 4 strategic focus areas. The first is concentrating on the technology advances and really Industry 4.0, the future of work, including smart manufacturing and smart automation. The second focus area is really that application of what students are learning in the classroom for these programs with work-based learning opportunities and training. And that also includes apprenticeships, internships, co-ops, entrepreneurship, and all of the various ways that students can take their learning into a workplace, into a real context. The next is competency-based education and really grounding in skills and knowledge that can lead to industry-recognized credentials and or certifications. And last but not least is concentration on adult learning opportunities. So we recognize as an organization that the fields of advanced technology have primarily been dominated by white males historically, and that there is a need and an opportunity for us to expand good jobs in these fields for underrepresented populations, communities of color, female workers and students, as well as our programs. And so we're concentrating on access, diversity, equity, and really building an inclusive environment. Those are our 4 strategic focus areas. As you can see from this map, we have members across the country, over 165 community and technical colleges, and it really is an incredible network of sharing expertise and learning. And as importantly is the fact that we have 45 strategic industry partners. And those industry partners, you can see the names here, really are a key collaborator with NCATC, provide tremendous insight and expertise, and support our college programs in a multitude of ways. It's really a strength of NCATC to have these business and industry partners. One last thing I wanted to note is that NCATC is connected with the 14 Manufacturing USA Innovation Institutes, which is their own network specializing in certain technologies. And NCATC is partnered with these Manufacturing USA Innovative Institutes. As our CEO, Craig McAtee of NCATC, sits on several education and workforce advisory councils and represents community colleges and our strategic partners via their membership in NCATC. So we are connected with them. And diving into our webinar today, I will introduce a colleague of mine on our NCATC board, Tony Neary, who is with Haas Automation, and she will introduce our speaker. Before we do that, I just wanted to mention that as we get started, if there are questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to add them to the chat box. We will have time for question and answer in time, and our Government Relations Committee is really honored to host this as we educate our members on policies that are pertinent to our world in advanced technology. So thank you, Tony, for introducing our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Mark. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here, for those that are joining us live, as well as those that are catching us on the replay. As Mark mentioned, for those that are live, we are willing and able to address any questions that you may have during the presentation from both of our speakers. You can just pop those right into the chat box. As Mark said, my name is Tony Neary. I'm the Director of Education at the Morris Group within our Haas division. I also have the honor of sitting on the board for not just NCATC, but also for AMPT, who I'll tell you a little bit more about. Let's start by talking about NTMA, our lead sponsor today, who's providing this webinar for us. NTMA is a US-based membership trade association with the power of 1,000 thriving tool and die and precision manufacturing companies. Since being founded in 1943, NTMA has remained relevant by changing with the times, focusing on the future of American manufacturing as exemplified by our members, and those are all small and medium-sized companies, many of them still family-owned and privately held. NTMA has the know-how, resources, and national presence to drive positive change and growth. Our membership is gaining momentum and bringing a new perception to precision manufacturing across the US. From NTMA, we formed AMPT, and AMPT stands for Advanced Manufacturing Practice and Education Development. And really the purpose of AMPT is to create a unified effort in developing and engaging America's precision manufacturing workforce. Our ultimate purpose is to rise to the unprecedented challenges of the skills gap and interest gap in our industry. For more information about our organization, our youth engagement program, National Robotics League, or any of our education and training initiatives, please go to amptmfg.com. At this time, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Omar Nashashibi, who for nearly 10 years has worked with clients, members of Congress, agency officials, public policy foundations, nonprofits, and media in DC. He's a founding partner of the Franklin Partnership and works with members of Congress on behalf of his clients and their coalition partners on a variety of issues, from trade to federal funding opportunities to telecommunications, to develop and execute legislative strategies to ensure success. Omar, thank you so much for being with us here today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Great, thanks so much, Tony, and Craig and everybody for having me today. And with that introduction, I'll just pretty much just try to jump in, but to give you a little bit of additional background about myself. Again, my name is Omar Nashashibi. I'm one of the founding partners of the Franklin Partnership. We're a nonpartisan, bipartisan firm up here on Capitol Hill, a block away from the Capitol normally. In addition to lobbying for the NTMA, we've been working for them now for over a decade, and I'll get into some of the lobbying on their behalf and how that ties into what you all do and the people that you all serve, which tend to be a lot of the manufacturers on whose behalf I work here in Washington, DC. In addition to the NTMA, we also lobby for another 4 manufacturing associations. So between the 5 of them, we lobby on behalf of about 3,000 small and medium-sized manufacturers, typically turning some kind of metal into components, dies, stamping, molds, or other materials and castings. And so from that breadth of having literally 3,000 bosses, it allows us to speak to them on a wide variety of issues, coast to coast, with members in virtually every state. And so with that, we can go to the next slide and just go ahead and get started. It's something that I learned a long time ago. I've been lobbying and I've been in Washington, starting full-time since '98, but lobbying really since 2000. And one of the first lines that I ever learned, and even before Elizabeth Warren made it catchy a few years ago, was, if you don't have a seat at the table in Washington, you really are on the menu. We've had clients come to Washington and complain about meeting with staffers and say, why am I doing this? And the 20-year-old staffer will say, don't worry, you don't have to come back here again, Mr. Smith. We'll make your decisions for you. And so with that, please, we can go to the next slide. And we really do see that. It is, if we go back one more, if you go and take a look at the approach that the NTMA specifically likes to take. The reason that we are involved in so many issues is because manufacturing is affected by so much policy. The NTMA was founded around World War II, specifically to provide more people and training and to bring workers the skills that they need to support the war effort, and has continued doing so for many years. So while our primary charge in many cases is to work on workforce issues, workforce training, recruitment, training, placement, we also have seen that clearly taxes, affect them, defense related, because many of these folks are supplying components. We like to speak to the customer's customer. You have to understand what's going on with not only the people I serve, but the people they ultimately are providing that finished good, that component, or that training to understand the economics and what their needs and stay relative and active. And so this reason we do have to lobby the Science Committee. We work with the Ways and Means and the tax writers. The Paycheck Protection Program, over 80% of our members took that loan. And the same thing on the agencies in OSHA. And we really do believe that NTMA's members really do benefit from this top to bottom approach. The reason I'm telling you this again is because most of my clients, most of our association member companies are customers of yours, or the terminology that you use. They are using your services, or their employees are using your services. And again, when you take a look at some of the issues that they see as challenges and opportunities today, some of those will come up in a few moments. And we've had members that have been very active in this space. Obviously, you've heard from Tony and her involvement, and Bill Padnos and the AMP programs and other areas. But increasingly, we've seen that government is your not so silent partner. Our members have seen that for good and for bad. There's definitely some public-private partnerships that we really are encouraging our members to continue exploring. But it's important for our members to also see that they have to take the government's actions into account. They have to look at, if you do not lobby to lift tariffs on your steel or aluminum, then you're going to have fewer resources to invest in workforce. And so that's why many of these issues are connected and intertwined in this broader ecosystem that we look at for manufacturing. But one of the areas that we believe that NTMA stands out from other groups is we really like to work with other associations, other coalition partners. This is Washington, D.C. It's very difficult to get out ahead of the noise. And we believe one way you do that is by seeking common allies. The NTMA will work, if we have a common purpose, we'll work with unions in one area and maybe have difficulties with them somewhere else. We'll oppose the steel industry on tariffs, but certainly be with them in a lot of the other places as well. But where we find common area, certainly as you can see here, we believe in providing those resources, promoting manufacturing here in America, whether it's through the Robotics League, through NTMAU, through the foundation and other partnerships. What I have found in my lobbying career, what's a very, very effective message is what I call the supply chain. When you bring in an educator, a trainer, a student, an employer, somebody and bring in all those folks together to speak with lawmakers virtually or online, or with people at Department of Labor, Education, or Defense, they start to see the start to finish. They can understand how that advanced manufacturing ecosystem works, and the role the centers play, the role the educators, the parents can play, and also the associations and the strategic partners. And so that's why we really like working with groups such as the National Skills Coalition. It brings together a broad group of folks, from healthcare to educators to manufacturers and retailers. And in a sense, that helps the lawmakers understand where can we build upon, what's the foundation. And on this next slide, as you'll see, where we go in not just our approach to advocacy, but we do believe that strength in numbers. Obviously, the NTMA has my lobbying firm and also a public relations firm to help get their message out, particularly in social media. But we really do believe that they hear enough from people like me. We do not believe in talking points. We believe in hard data, and more importantly, from stories from folks on the ground. I think the most effective lobbyists are you all. My goal ultimately is to work myself out of a job, but it's you all and the people that you are serving. Those testimonials are critical when you are going into Capitol Hill. And that's why we want our membership, our advanced manufacturing, our owners, our executives, our employees, folks working there every day who have these experiences to tell their stories. And that's why we really do believe in relying on data, and critical coalition building relies on a foundation beyond just a talking point. And that's why I appreciate what Craig and your team does. Even just going through some of the materials, what you brought to the table there through our National Skills Coalition conversations, that really does help. So that, see, there is something behind this. This isn't just another program or another policy that we want in perpetuity. And this is why, as I mentioned, we do work with coalitions. The NTMA has been a member of the Research and Development Tax Credit Coalition for over a decade. We've been part of Coalition for Workplace Safety and numbers others that deal with steel tariffs and taxes as well, and obviously with Business Leaders United. We really do encourage other groups to continue following that model. And as we jump right in, Craig, we can go ahead and go to the next slide and go into more of the policy. And I want to go ahead and talk about the priorities that we're hearing from our manufacturers that many of you are also serving in their employees as well. And please, you may advance the slide as well here. Let me just start right now where the government is taking notice. So I got here towards the end of Clinton's term in office. So this puts me several administrations in. And having seen how manufacturing has changed over the years is quite significant. Manufacturing was barely mentioned in the State of the Union annually when they go to Congress. Now you repeatedly see more than a dozen mentions, 24, depends on the administration. And you can see that they are taking notice. We do not call them manufacturing jobs. This is the government terminology. We believe these are manufacturing careers. A job is what you're doing in between or as you get to find your pathway to that career. We really do want to emphasize these are family sustaining careers with opportunities for continued advancement. I've met a 26-year-old in South Bend, Indiana, making $110,000 a year with no college debt because he went through the proper industry recognized accreditation programs, competency-based in that part of the state, and really understood the career pathway that he was on by making those choices. But as you can see, manufacturing is very popular. So we started seeing quite a bit towards the beginning of the Obama administration, where a real emphasis on manufacturing careers around 2012 going up 2011, but especially under the previous administration, they made it quite a priority. And now under the pandemic, everyone has seen the importance of domestic manufacturing and sourcing and relying here. You can see we have 480,000 jobs that are currently open in durable goods in manufacturing, and that's very significant. Up here on Capitol Hill, we definitely have the attention of policymakers, whether it's inside the administration or over on Congress at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. Just take a look that the phrase advanced manufacturing appears 56 bills in the current Congress that is only 7 months old. The phrase also appears 37 times in the 100-day supply chain report that was issued by the administration. And you can see some language down below that was included in a recent Senate passed bill that likely and possibly could also be included in a House measure that really tries to focus on domestic manufacturing, domestic sourcing, advanced manufacturers. We've heard about semiconductor shortages. Obviously, that's front page every day, but it goes beyond that. And the governments throughout the state levels and the federal level have recognized they need to continue to push and advance and be a partner with industry as we grow advanced manufacturing in America. And as you'll see on this next slide here, we really are trying to emphasize in our efforts on Capitol Hill, the topics that are top of mind for our members. On these last two slides, before I'll turn it over to Jeff here in a few minutes, we're going to talk here on some of the general issues that we're actively working on now. And then on the second one in a moment, we'll discuss some of the workplace areas that are really top of mind for our manufacturers that are really trapped right now. They're trapped between a shortage of workers, wage pressures, raw material shortages, and possibly pending tax increases in the upcoming infrastructure legislation that may pass in the next 45 to 90 days. And so how do manufacturers plan for the rest of the year and also for the coming years and what levels of investment they're able to make? The number one issue that we're hearing in the short-term concern is raw material. Access to raw material is the worst that we've seen, and we've been lobbying on raw material issues since 2002. The prices for hot rolled, one of the top steel used, especially in automotive, is now over $2,005 a metric ton. That's not something we've seen before. Many of our tool and die makers, or die makers especially, use plate, also around $1,800 a ton, metric ton, not something that we've ever seen before in the last 2 decades. And the price pressures here are quite significant in that our US manufacturers, particularly those that are using more significant metals, they're paying 40% premium over European counterpart, 60 to 70% more than their Chinese competitors. And that is a real policy problem, especially when we talk to folks such as you all, when we need to tell where is the business going to prioritize their resources. The way that many of the manufacturers look at it is they can't make a part out of a product they do not have. So they're out of a raw material they cannot have. So if they don't have that input, how are they going to manufacture the good? Similar problem. If they don't have the people, the bodies in the door, it makes it difficult, but not impossible to manufacture that product. And that especially will increasingly lead to automation over time. When a business cannot find that employees, they need to remain in business. If you're in manufacturing, you will find that advanced technology, manufacturers are innovative by nature. They will continue to find a way. And we will continue to increasingly see that automation continue throughout the country because frankly, the robots don't get sick and they don't cry when they get fired. They are expensive. They're not as robust, but in many areas where we're seeing an automated production part be able to happen in that sequence, they're increasingly looking at it. And that's just a nature of economics. If you can't find the people and you can't get the raw materials, or you have to pay a premium for the raw materials versus the people, those are decisions that these businesses are making right now. We had a call with some this morning that verified they are making these very difficult decisions. They can't find the bodies, but they do need to prioritize getting that raw material shortage right now is worse that they've ever seen. And for your planning purposes and the demand that you should see from some of these advanced manufacturers, our sources are telling us that the disruptions in the raw material supply chains will continue throughout the remainder of this year and also likely into at least the first quarter of next year. And so these disruptions are also causing problems with innovation, with R&D, and with new experimentation of new technologies. And you can see the concern with taxes as well, when 60% of our members reported in a survey a few months ago, earlier in the year, that they would delay capital expenditures, which is important when it comes to advanced manufacturers, especially with some of the expensive equipment that's being purchased and leased, with 40% also saying they will hire fewer workers. They still are investing, they still are claiming credits and deductions. We do support expanding the Section 127, but the infrastructure bill, if and when that does get through, is a cause for celebration and frankly also for concern, because it is going to increase the short and long-term demand on raw materials and on individuals. And that's going to create additional disruption for manufacturers and distributors throughout the supply chain. And so for our manufacturers with whom we consult with, we are telling them that if this does happen, it has the potential to take out a lot of raw material that many of you use that will only exacerbate the current situation. But on this next slide that we'll go to, as I get ready to wrap up, I do want to talk about some of the specific aspects of the workforce lobbying aspect of advocacy that the NTMA has undertaken on its own and with its partners over a number of years. And I do think that when we look at where we are with regards to workforce issues, there's no question there's skilled job openings. I showed you on the previous slide, we're over 800,000 overall in manufacturing. If you look at the top topics, there's no question the workforce shortage is there. 82% have skilled job openings right now in their shops. That was still a January number, but I'll defer to my colleague or my boss, Bill Padnos, and I think at NTMA, and he'll confirm this is still the top issue. We do not have bodies to get in there. And if you look at it, the 91% of our members report severe or moderate challenges recruiting qualified employees. The bonuses aren't working. The referral bonuses can sometimes help, but they're competing with one another, and that's making it very, very difficult. From a policy standpoint, from a capital standpoint, when these employers continue to face these challenges, recruiting these qualified workers, I shouldn't even say qualified, we're calling them qualifiable. If they show up beyond their first paycheck, if they show up for their job interview, that's a positive sign. We're no longer looking for qualified workers. We're looking for qualifiable. We will train them with your help and your guidance. Right now, we need to find ways to get people in the door, which is why the NTMA for many years, even when I first started with them, there was a big emphasis on youth education, awareness, and ultimately training. Reaching out to those middle school, I have 7 and 10-year-old boys, and this is the prime time to be exposing them to advanced manufacturing technologies and robotics competitions. The NTMA sponsors the National Robotics League, NRL.org, and I let my boys take a look at that, and they love watching it and seeing what these kids, just barely a few years older than my 10-year-old, are already creating in shops around America and competing in gymnasiums around the country. This is the way that we are trying to find unique and innovative approaches, in addition to using our efforts here in Washington, D.C. and the microphone that they've got out here. But work-based learning is a big emphasis. We're even looking at the states that do allow limited access for 16 and 17-year-olds where permitted, not to operate machinery, but at least to have some of that exposure and experience that they get out there, because the competency-based training, treating apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships and work-based learning, treating those like AP style credits, so you can receive your work-based learning, earn and learn at the same time and receive a degree. We can have these children turn into students and into workers very quickly with the career that is available. And I'll let Jeff get into some of the other policy points, but as you can see, this is why we're promoting the Jobs Act and Pell Grants and expansion of the Perkins pilot programs, and also college transparency, making sure the trainers have the digital resources that they need, NTMAU, online services, things that we're already doing out there. The policymakers want to see all stakeholders on the same page, which is why I really appreciate what Craig is doing today and what National Skills Coalition and NTMA are doing, because when we walk into any office, whether on Capitol Hill or within an agency, with a unified message and can say from start to finish of this pathway for this individual, for this ecosystem of industry, they know we're legit, they know we have a plan, and they will be partners with us. And so with that, if we can go to the next slide, I'll just go ahead and get ready to turn it right back over to you all and turn it over to Craig and Jeff. Mark.
Thank you so much, Omar. That was a wealth of information, and appreciate you bringing your expertise to our webinar and from the perspective of our strategic partners and industry side. And we are new in this space in government relations. We have two focus areas and really educating our members for NCATC on pertinent policies. And additionally, we want to help our members understand how they can take action. So look forward to hearing from Jeffrey shortly on ways through the National Skills Coalition and Blue. And so with that, I'll introduce our second speaker. Jeffrey Connor Naylor is the Director of Business Leaders United, Blue, supported by the National Skills Coalition to amplify the advocacy, policy, and equitable recovery work that is currently happening across the ecosystem. And that is a broad ecosystem that includes manufacturing and advanced technology. I've had the pleasure of working with National Skills Coalition and Blue for a number of years and always learn so much, and they provide so much guidance to practitioners on how to take action. So thank you, Jeffrey, for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you for the invitation to speak with you this afternoon. It was great to hear from Omar first. He has been a tremendous friend of Blue for a long time. I know that he has brought many of the folks that he works with into our organization and our work to advocate for these smart investments in skills. Today, I'm going to talk to you about our industry recovery panels, specifically the one that we pulled together for manufacturing. Before I do that, though, next slide, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of who Blue is. So we are an initiative of the National Skills Coalition. We primarily are a free private network of companies from across the United States. And what we do is we fully support them to advocate for these smart investments in skills and workforce. Next slide, please. So at the beginning of 2021, we had the idea to begin to pull together folks from 4 different industries to come up with recommendations for the administration and for elected officials around how we can pull ourselves out of the slowdown from the COVID-19 crisis, and really think about what sort of workforce needs that these various industry groups have, and what investments that we can make to really prepare individuals with the skills that companies need to be successful as we leave this time. And so for the manufacturing group, we pulled together a group of companies, business association groups. So Omar participated in that group. Craig from NCATC, he participated in this group as well. And then we also had educators and trainers who participated, and then associations too who represent the workforce themselves. Next slide. So I'm going to put in the chat box right now a link to our report from this group. So if you go there, you can see that the recommendations in that in that link are pretty broad. This afternoon, I'm going to focus on those that are moving right now, those that might have legs, those that have the potential to have legs to move up on the hill. The first bucket of information I want to talk about here is, and one of the things that really jumped out for this group is one that we need to invest in skills. And so this is a follow-up to the $100 billion investment that the administration suggested for skills training over the next 10 years. Now, this was initially going to be included in the infrastructure bill that has recently passed the Senate. Now, originally, there was going to be this tremendous amount of investment. It wasn't going to be for 1 year. It's going to be for over the next 10 years. It was pulled out in the negotiations on that side. There was also a call within that bill, that larger first sort of initial bill, that initial idea is what I should say, to also invest in things like childcare. As we come out of the pandemic, the one thing that we hear a lot of is that individuals want to go back to work. There's a variety of reasons why they might not want to, but one of the big ones is that they don't know who are going to watch the kids. And so what we also heard from this group is that we also need to invest in the supports that will allow folks to get to a school, to help train them, or to get to work. Now, in the infrastructure bill, there's also going to be sort of this tremendous investment in childcare too. And that, of course, was pulled out. Now, right now, in the House side, there's a bill, which you might have heard about, the reconciliation bill, that is essentially going to pull in, or would like to pull in, a lot of those other investments that were left out of the infrastructure bill. Unfortunately, at this time, what we've heard is, well, I'll take a step back. Originally in that bill, we had hoped that $100 billion for skills over the next 10 years was going to be included in that. What we've heard first is that it was bumped down to about 50, then to about half of that. And now we're really not sure how much investment we are going to see in that. And when I say investment in skills, that money would potentially be used all across the workforce development system here in the United States. Now, the childcare side, we do expect to see a more robust investment in that bill there. The one thing I will say is that this is our top priority at Blue and at NSC right now. At the end of the discussion, I will talk to you about an opportunity to lend your name to a sign-on that we are circulating to encourage Congress to make these kinds of investments. Next slide, please. So also within this group, We also heard the need to really invest in short-term skills training. Essentially, what we've heard and what we've heard for a long time is that employers need to find individuals who have specific skills for their industry. Now, one way to do that, a lot of times they don't need sort of a 2-year associate's, a 4-year degree, but it might be a shorter term training that might not offer an academic credential, but would offer a credential that is used in an industry. So one of the ways to do that, and one of the ways to help individuals pay for a short-term program, is through the Pell Grant. Now, the Pell Grant is currently only available for longer-term education. It's really not available for short-term. You have to have about 600 hours of instruction to count to be able to access that. The Jobs Act is a bill that is popular on both sides of the aisle, and it would essentially allow the Pell Grant to be used for these short-term trainings. One of the ways that this could be used, if this were passed, is this would offer the opportunity for, say, a community college to develop a credential, work with an industry to develop a program that would be able to provide those skills that employers need. Next slide. And actually, before I go on to the next slide, the one thing I'll say is that the Jobs Act this year has almost moved twice. It's almost been attached to other bills within the economic recovery space. And this is something that we would love to see passed. We've worked on this for a long time. Like I said, there is a lot of support for it on both sides. It's just, at this point in time, it just hasn't had its time yet to move on. So next slide, please. So the other thing that we heard a lot of is that employers really need support to be able to collaborate with a trainer to develop a curriculum, a training that would lead to a credential. And this is especially true for small employers who just don't have the opportunities to really engage in this kind of work. Again, like I said, we also heard that even if an individual wants to join something like this, they really need the support to be able to advance, but then also once they get into a job, to be able to advance within that job. Apprenticeships are a big thing that we know works. The Builds Act is a great opportunity if it were to be passed that would really provide that support to develop the programs that would allow an employer and educator to get together to develop something that could then transition into an apprenticeship. It would also provide those supports that would allow an individual to excel, to be able to get to a job and to be able to succeed. Now, we were hoping that a part of that $100 billion in skills within the infrastructure bill would essentially go towards something like the Builds Act. At this point in time, of course, it looks like that 100 billion is going to be cut down. Next slide, please. So also on top of that, what we know is that technology has become a part of a lot of jobs. During the pandemic, as folks stayed home more, as folks left jobs, as jobs dried up because of lack of demand, that companies began to look at how they can sort of fill gaps with technology. So as we come out of the pandemic, we also know that individuals are going to need more skills, different kinds of skills for jobs in this new economy. So one thing that we would love to see is an investment in skills that allow folks to learn how to use technology. Now, what we find is when funding is available in this space, it typically goes towards things like access to broadband, computers, more of the hardware side. Now, whenever there is an investment in skills themselves, it's normally an investment in helping folks get the foundational skills, learning how to use a computer, that kind of thing. What we'd like to see is the ability to go beyond that and to offer funds to train for occupational skills. So if, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows, if someone on a plant floor needs to learn how to use a certain machine that is more tech-based, we want to be able to have funds, be able to draw down funds to offer those kinds of skills. Now, the Digital Equity Act is one of the better opportunities that we have now to get those funds. This act was actually included in the infrastructure bill as it is right now. But to be able to access the funding won't be, well, as we see it right now, I should say, won't be as cut and dry. If and when it is passed by the House, there are some of the details will need to be worked out by the administration on how the funds can be used. Essentially, the Digital Equity Act will provide funds to each state to essentially invest in their infrastructure in this space within their state. It might not be as apparent that funding is available for skills. So it could take some advocacy within a state to be able to draw down those funds to invest in a skills training program within that state. Next slide, please. So to wrap up, I just want to talk a little bit about the sign-on that we have right now. This is going to be a sign-on for companies only and for association groups. We have about 100 plus signatories right now on it. The letter does not specifically, and I'll drop the link to the letter in the chat right now. It does not specifically call out any specific bill, and we don't necessarily call for a specific funding amount. The goal of this is really to show support for an investment in skills. So we have a lot of great support right now. If anyone on this call would like to lend their name to that, the deadline to do so is September 10th, although we plan to send up a first cut of that bill next week. So if you'd like to sign on, let us know before the 10th. The link that I just shared will also have a way for you to sign on at the bottom, but you can also, next slide, please, simply reach out to me. And if you have any thoughts about it, if there's anything more that you want to know about it, you can contact me. And if you simply would just like to shoot me something to let me know that you would like to sign on, that would be great too. So with that, I will pass it back over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was a great deal of information as well, and really nuanced in how these policies are coming around and where they're at, especially with that $100 billion. I think right now what we wanted to do is just open it up for questions and discussion with Omar and Jeffrey. And so I would invite folks to drop any questions you have in the chat box, or you could unmute yourselves and ask the question verbally. And both Omar and Jeffrey are on.
Hi, this is William Gary from Cuyahoga Community College. Thank you for your input. I want to talk a little bit about the Jobs Act, Jeffrey. What do you think in terms of passage can we expect? I know that it's been out there and there have been modifications, particularly as it relates to clock hours and what have you. What's your prognosis, if you will, on where that stands at this point? And for those of us in community colleges, what can we hope to expect over the next quarter?
I mean, for us, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, this has been a bill that has been out there for a long time. Part of the reason why it hasn't passed this year is more on the procedural side. So it was going to be attached to one bill. I forget the name of the bill off the top of my head, but essentially it was pulled out because they just weren't going to allow sort of anything else to be included in that bill. What we know right now is it has a lot of support on both sides. I always hate to put a date on when something like this could be passed. I would say that the current state of affair adds a little bit more juice to the bill. But at this point in time, I think it's just too hard to really say sort of when this might be passed. And Omar, if there's anything else that you'd like to add on this as well, please go ahead. And
yeah, thanks, Jeff. On the USICA bill, that's the United States Innovation and Competitiveness Act. That's the major supply chain Schumer bill that was moving in the summertime. And I know we put out an action alert, and Blue did as well, to their members trying to engage and have that. We did talk to a couple of staff working on it. And I agree with Jeff on there. It just didn't feel like the right vehicle, and they were trying to keep it a little bit more streamlined, especially had all the amendments. We still are getting, I don't know what some of the other lobbyists around town are picking up, and your contacts too, Jeff, but a lot of it still seems like we're focused right now on the innovation, or excuse me, on the infrastructure bill. That's going to get through. That's going to take up most of the oxygen in the room. And there are still other priorities at the Education Committee. The House has already passed the National Apprenticeship Act, which has not been updated since 1937. Biden likes to reference FDR a whole lot. Well, there's a place that you can. So we're still thinking that in many ways, the committees still have a Higher Education Act. They've got the Jobs Act. They've got the Build Act. They've got a number of these together. And what is the appropriate vehicle? Do they lump them together later on? And how does that go? That's just the challenge right now, is there are a number of those bills that are in that area that are still just being held up because of procedural issues. They're all bipartisan, to Jeff's point. It's more of a procedural mechanism in finding vehicles, particularly in the Senate.
Hi, this is Scott from Boy. I have a question for Omar. I put it in the chat, but I probably put a lot of mistakes in my typing. I apologize for that. So, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about the statement you made on the nature of economics and the way businesses will make choices between the limited resources or the impact on inputs that they get. So I'm kind of curious. You had made mention that your organization is with others to help to advocate for a variety of policy issues. But do you feel that that's coming together well between a lot of the educational, workforce development organizations as well as businesses? Because it's not a siloed decision that a business makes, right?
No.
So I was just curious what your thought was on that.
Sure. I believe there are certain areas that are making that connection. I think that in organized labor, there's certainly a concern there. You talk to the steel industry as well. What we see in a lot of our manufacturers, I go back to 2011, around that time when maybe even 2010, when we started coming out of the recovery, and we had direct conversations with manufacturers saying they never want to go through these conversations with families and employees, again, and to the level that they did. And we do see that behind the scenes, there's still a lot of scars from that economic Great Recession back then that a lot of business owners today still look back to. And so I do believe that there is an understanding quietly in some of those in business community from the policymakers, especially on the Democratic side of the aisle, there is concern about automation. However, where we do see the automation conversation increasingly going, it doesn't necessarily mean fewer workers. It means more skilled workers and fewer less skilled, lower skilled jobs that are available. And so a mass change there, they are starting to increasingly see that potentially. Where we see automation, for example, happen in some of the recycling side, when a part gets shoveled out, you can have a machine just move it out for you instead of a human going in and out. And so I think some of them are, but no, I don't believe that it's beyond the economists. I don't believe that policymakers have fully grasped it. I think it's starting to percolate increasingly. And I think as you come out of this is another second economic hit in a decade. And now that we escalate out of it, we have a shortage of workers, and manufacturers are going to find a way around that.
Greetings, gentlemen. This is Howard Drake, Director of Polk State's Corporate College in Central Florida. I have a question for Jeff. You had spoken about the short-term Pell Grant possibility. There's a number of us in the corporate training world that have been submitting for years how important that would be, because that's where we're going to garner the pipeline to get these folks in. That's been the one major stumbling block. So what is the realistic passage of that?
Sure. Well, I think as Omar had said, is that there's a ton of support for the issue up on the Hill on both sides. The issue really right now is that they have a full plate. The infrastructure bill, the reconciliation bill, those both right now at least are taking up all of the air. And as Omar said, there's a lot of other issues within the education space that they need to take up at this time. So while there is support, it's really finding the right way to pass the bill. And it's honestly, it's hard to put a date on that at this point.
Thank you.
And this is Mark again. I know we just have a few minutes to wrap up, but did want to throw out one quick question regarding just funding and trends. I know you've talked about these bills and the possibility of more resources, but no, there's other state and federal grants available. So wondering, Omar and or Jeffrey, if you could speak to any other resources that may be available for colleges to support their programs and students.
Sure, I can start, and Jeff, turn it over to you. But one thing that I would really counsel is what's the saying? It's never too late to get started here. You really do need to start thinking about public-private partnerships. You need to start thinking about your alliance and grants recipients. If we're going to have these major bills going through, $3.5 trillion human infrastructure, 1.2 hard infrastructure, you have the Jobs Act, Builds Act, a number of these others, National Apprenticeship Act. these are going to have funding. They're going to have grant awards. Some are going to be competitive, some are going to be formulaic. Many you're going to have to go through your state, potentially through your county, and some through the Department of Commerce, Education, or Labor. What we believe is that creating that, again, that ecosystem at a local level with the support of national organizations is going to be critical. I think even before these bills are passed, those that have bipartisan support in the context of the programs being created that are going to create grant dollars going out the door, now is the time to look within your community. With whom could I potentially partner? With what state entity? With what business leader? As you look, for example, at the recent Department of Commerce EDA grant that came out, that's going to send millions out the door, grant applications due in January. That again wants to see a STEM talent developed through innovation grants, but it needs partnerships. Most of the grants that we are seeing coming out, particularly of the federal government and some at the state level, want to see that it's not going to a single entity that will just on its own develop a program. They want to know with whom you're going to partner. They want to see the long life cycle of how this can continue on its own. And they want to know that there's a demand there. They want to see that the advanced technology manufacturers in that community are not only viable, but are growing, and you're going to meet those demands. So not only am I seeing a number of grants come out, increasingly we're seeing tax credits. The NTMA maintains a list of the different grants and tax credits that are out there for employers, from apprenticeships, $9,500 in Connecticut, to another $3,500 credit in Illinois. In other states, in Indiana, there's just a flat out manufacturing for certain industries within manufacturing. They also get a manufacturing production credit, and tool and die advanced manufacturing appears on that. So working with your partners, identifying these grants and working together with the support of national groups such as these, I think is really, it's never too late until it is. And I would strongly suggest looking around and saying, how can we bring some of these federal resources locally? Because a lot of dollars are going to start going out the door very shortly.
Right, and I could not agree with that more. The other thing that I'll bring up here is the SNAP Employment and Training program is an opportunity right now. I know that Mark probably knows a little bit about this. I know that Kate Kinder, that he used to work with there, is a big advocate of this. It is essentially provides the opportunity to have a 50-50 match where you could draw down 50% of funds. If you put in half, then you could get federal funds for sort of the other half. And that funding can be used for a wide range of things. And I believe that NSC is going to be putting together a few briefs here in the coming months to chat a little bit more about that, or to, to give you a little bit more info about that as well.
Yeah, especially lastly, if I could cap onto that quickly, this government, especially this administration, and I know the priority a lot on Capitol Hill, when we went through the Great Recession, our biggest challenge was the 99 weekers and getting long-term unemployed back in, especially when many of them didn't have the resumes up to speed. And that was a real challenge. And I think there's a growing concern quietly here in Washington, once you get past that 27 weeks, that there's going to be a challenge, which is why you're increasingly seeing a good amount of grants and opportunities coming out to not only reach out to the underserved, that was addressed in one of the 4 pillars that Mark discussed earlier, but also those that are now reaching into that longer term unemployed defined at 27 weeks. So definitely be looking to those. To Jeff's point, increasingly you're going to see an emphasis there, and already are.
Hello, everyone. Craig McAtee. Good to see you all virtually, as we've been doing for 18 months now. I think it's at the unfortunate time. We could probably go on for another half an hour and ask some questions, but I want to officially thank all of our attendees today. We had a lot of good quality folks that I haven't seen for a while, and it was great to share the time with all of you. But I want to especially thank Omar from the Franklin Partnership and NTMA for sponsoring this, and Jeffrey Connor Naylor from National Skills Coalition and Blue, which I'm so thankful that we're part of both groups over the last year or two, and appreciate all that you're doing. I want to reemphasize that signatory letter, and please connect with us as we move forward. I just put in the chat that We will post this recording on our website in the next 24, 48 hours. And Mark, thank you for hosting and being our moderator today. With that, we'll close out, and everyone stay safe and have a great rest of the summer. Thank you, Omar and Jeffrey.